Hello! I am so excited to join you today to talk to Deborah Kimmett about her book, Window Shopping for God. I am going to find her now, and then we're going to get started. My internet up here is a
Hi,
Hi!
how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good.
I think that's going to go down in history as one of our fastest turnovers.
I I had a few false starts earlier in this book tour, so I kind of got the hang of it now. So
Nice. That's awesome.
yeah,
I am so excited to talk to you about this book.
thank you.
It was funny. It was familiar to me in so many ways. I was surprised reading throughout how many things we have in common, but also that familiarity of addiction, of growing old, of women experiencing loss. It was profound in so many ways. But before we get started, and thank you everyone for joining us, we have 2 tickets to give away to Deborah's smoke show, a comedy show on November 24th. I have more details, and I'll put more details in the post that I put up after this. But before we hear you read the first 30 lines from Window Shopping for God, I'm going to share my own sort of blurb, if that's okay. Window Shopping for God is about a lapsed Catholic on a quest for spiritual connection on a road potted with brain injury, addiction, depression, transcendental meditation, brain tumors, peeing into a roasting pan, premature birth, improvisation, therapy, dating an Irishman, and deathbed fart jokes. Not necessarily in that order. A personal and often very funny journey of appreciation and affirmation. Window Shopping for God is a reminder that there is no order to a life well lived or well died, and no funny in a life well ordered.
Oh, you should have written the press release. That would have been a great pitch. That's wonderful. I'm just like only 6 months in. I'm finally getting the hang of this. This would be good.
I'll send it to you. Feel free to
Sure.
use it. It doesn't come naturally. Just so you know. So I'm thrilled. Everyone gets to hear the first 30 lines of this book. Are you gonna?
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the first chapter is called Preacher Man. Do you believe in God? That was the first day I met the man called Preacher Man. I was sitting in front of the scone place at St. Clair and Christie as he preached the word of God. That's if God was having a really bad day. He stood on his crate, impeccably groomed. He wore a beige cashmere coat, quite fancy for a street preacher, and a fedora with a black scarf under his hat to keep his head warm. Upon his crate, he loomed large to passers-by. Sitting there eating my scone, I had so many questions. What was the first day he decided to come out to the street and preach? Has his yelling converted one single person? And why do you never see a woman standing out here on soapboxes? It was 2014. I was glad to be back in the city in the thick of things. I had my new old dog, Gus, a 14-year-old Shih Tzu with a severe underbite that made him look like Marlon Brando in The Godfather. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. I'd lived in both city and country settings for equal amounts of time. I grew up in a small town, moved to a big city, back to live on a small island near Kingston, and then returned to the city again. And I loved living in every one of those settings until the moment I didn't. One morning I'd wake up to a wind blowing in off the lake, and I'd start building a case against the place and the people. I moved back to Toronto a few months after I found out my brother Kevin was sick. Been perfectly happy living in the woods with 12 acres of forest behind me, the Cataraqui Trail to walk on daily, and Vardy Lake nearby for daily dips in the summer. Within a few months of receiving the bad news, I began to tell everybody that I hated trees and my landlord smoked on the back porch. To top it off, the long driveway was never plowed and I was constantly snowed in. I only got snowed in once, but I was making my case to pack up and go. I didn't think there was any connection between Kevin's impending death and my impulse to move yet again. I gave my notice, packed up Gus, went to Toronto, the opposite direction of where he lived.
I struggled to figure out I struggled to figure out where to start, where to like get us into this conversation, because there are so many magical moments and so many funny moments in this book. But I think it's probably, we talked earlier, and you talked about your brother Kevin and losing your brother Kevin, and that a big part of the spiritual journey in this book involves him, and your reconciliation and his death. And at one point in the novel, you also say, when you're teaching your writing students, that every good story, or every story, starts suddenly. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, did this, do you think this memoir would exist, or this collection of memories would exist, if Kevin hadn't gotten sick suddenly?
Well, I read your question. That was so cool. I think, to be fair, all the memoir exists, and Kevin was at the end of the
Mhm.
book. He did not filter through the book. He was just in the list of spiritual dilemmas I had over my life. And I submitted it to 2 or 3 publishing houses in that state. And I can't even say I got rejection. I got ghosted. I mean, I never even got a response.
Mhm.
Then about a year before it got chosen to be published, I restructured it, because at the end, Kevin's um, sickness was so important, and it was a big surprise at the end. It was like the last 40 pages.
Mhm.
And so I put him up through the top, and in that draft, he became way too important. So yes, it wouldn't exist in the manner it is. I think the piece that was the essential question in life is, the guy, preacher man, kind of plays an important part of the question, which is, this idea, like, do you believe in God? And, for some people, it's like, I don't believe in any of that stuff. That's not the word I want to choose. I believe in the universe. And my point is, we can call it 50 things, but when I grew up, it was called God. So I wanted
Mhm.
it to be that. And that title, Window Shopping for God, was in my head for a lot of years when I was writing the essays.
Yeah.
Yes. So Kevin's death was a great question. And as a writer, I'm sure everyone that's a writer and that might be listening is, it's just trying to get the question right. And I realize, although there's a spiritual sort of hunger or wanting to find my place in the universe, there is a part of me that was always sort of searching for, am I forgiven? Am I forgiven for being a person who didn't accept
Mhm.
church? Am I forgiven for a person who became an alcoholic? And Kevin, I asked his forgiveness fairly early on, and he basically tells me to, go
Yeah.
F myself.
You can
Um,
swear
so
here. This is a swear.
Oh, is it
I
okay?
swear.
But yeah, I love swearing. But I just thought it's kind of the essential question of how much I didn't forgive myself for I mean, essentially, the book's a lot about that, of not being a person who could choose a traditional path.
Right.
I did, and I always say to people, if you think there's going to be God at the end of this, you're going to be sorely. I mean, I have a lot of born agains that want to follow me on Instagram, but I'm like, well, I don't care if you do, but I got to say, because as soon as they want me to sign on the dotted line with any spiritual practice, I tend to want to go somewhere else. I think that's part of my rebellious stage, but it's like, yeah, I find it hard to call myself something.
Yeah. And I think, as a lapsed Catholic, there's also a scene in the book where you are touching the pew in the church, uh,
Yeah.
at Kevin's funeral, and I've often talked to my husband about this need, almost, to go back to church, even though I don't believe in a sing. I'm so everything
That's exactly
opposed
it. That's
Yeah,
it.
everything opposed to what the Catholic Church stands for. I was never more at peace. So much so that I used to faint in church every Sunday. I was never more at peace than sitting in a pew.
Me
And
too.
so I wanted to talk to you about that. You know, lapsed Catholics are so funny. It's like this, you know, done. It's over, right? But I know so many United Church people and like so many Protestants, right, who leave the church and then go back when they have kids and embrace it. What do you think it is I mean, it could very well just be the doctrine, but what do you think it is about Catholics?
I don't know, but I think the Jewish faith can be like that too. I think it's cultural.
Yeah.
I think, and I think I, I really, I really would have made this much angrier, this against the Catholic Church, when I first started writing it. But then as the book went on, I started to feel like there's a great tenderness for my own childhood instead of being mad at it. And the
Mm-hmm.
smell of the pews and my grandmother talking during Mass and going there for my social life. And even when I was drinking as a teenager, like going Saturday nights, so you didn't have to get hung over. All the Protestants are like, you bunch of
Yeah.
hypocrites. But we got, and I'm sure people who are non-Catholic are going, really? But there was a sense that we were kind of special that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when like about 14, I stopped believing in any of it, but I kind of hid out and tried to believe in it. But that whole thing of I should go back to the church, I said that finally left me after menopause. So I was like, maybe it's the hormones. You just like don't want it anymore. But every September I thought I'm going to go back to university. And then every time something big would happen in my life, I think, but if I was really spiritual, I'd go back to the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you go to the United Church? Because it's like it's not got the bells and whistles I want. But anyway, thank goodness. I don't know. After about 50, I stopped searching at all inside um, Catholicism at all. Like it's part
Mm-hmm.
of me, and then when Kevin was dying, I stopped being a Buddhist. The thoughts of being a Buddhist. I'm not a Buddhist. I
Yeah.
finally had to say, you don't do anything Buddhist like,
Right.
except you call yours. Because it was like I was calling myself a Buddhist to make people think I sound, I'm kind of hip. I'm sure that's my age group too, because I don't know if that's true for people today, but it was kind of like, but everybody's got a thing like the younger people or say 40 and under, yoga and mindfulness is the buzzword. Like
Right.
everybody's mindful now. And I'm like, it's the same thing. We're just looking for a place to find our way where we can feel at home.
Yeah.
And also, it's nice to belong somewhere to a community or a thought that can, especially if it's got an open-mindedness to it. I think mindfulness, I mean, how can you argue with mindfulness? It's
Right.
beautiful. But, for some people, yoga's the thing, or, cold plunging. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think we're all trying to find a way to come back to ourselves and be in our body. And for me, yeah, it was just a long journey of trying to be okay in my own skin.
Yeah. Yeah. And that you find you also have a moment in the book where you talk about finding peace on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing we share is Second City and improv. I felt the same way. I could be someone entirely not myself when I was up on the stage, but um, I sort of feel like I did that to avoid writing real stuff down or like real adjacent stuff in fiction. And you said that when you were on stage it was like being like meditation, like you compared the
Well,
peace you felt.
it's kind of like having your ass on fire. There's nothing to do but be in that moment.
Yeah.
Like when they sit and breathe, you could go to space and back in your head. But I just performed to a sold out crowd on Saturday, and
Nice.
every time I go to do a new show, I go, I'm never doing this again. I'm too old. This is ridiculous. I'm going to become the fat Elvis. Like it's just not going to happen. And my kids are, I'm like, I'm retiring before it's too late. And then it killed Thursday and then it really killed Saturday. And I
Nice.
was like, now maybe I don't have to retire. That would be a bit, but
Yeah.
as for the real thing, I only improvised for 3
Hmm.
years. I taught improv for 20. I started writing what you would call real stuff really soon because I liked being on the page privately. I think
Right.
publicly, Second City taught you to take a risk, make big swings, say yes, try to make they say make your partner look good. But what I
Yeah.
loved about when I got down to the page was how do you make your writing look good? Like, how do you say yes to your crazy ideas and not negate them? So I really felt it was the foundation of my writing, but I am disciplined. Like I write a lot and I
Hmm.
rehearse a lot and I'm not an improviser. I mean, once I learn it, I can play around on stage, but I always have directors who are true improvisers. They show up late. They don't
Yeah.
know what they're doing. I'm like, I'm so not that person. Like I'm a oldest of six, bossy cow. If you said 4 o'clock, I mean 4 o'clock. In fact, if you came at 10 to 4, I'd respect you.
Right.
And do up your shirt for God's sake. Like I've been like that since I was 20. So I don't know how to explain it. I always looked so like people would say to me, why don't you smile when you're on stage? And I was always taking my comedy deadly serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the writing on the page, I became a playwright at the Tarragon. I wrote a little essay book. I wrote a play that got nominated for, shortlisted for Governor General's Award. But I love the privacy of the page.
Hmm.
It was like there's such a part when you take it out to the world that's a whole other experience, isn't it? Like when you
Oh yeah.
have to let
Yeah.
people read it.
Yeah.
Like they signed
And
the book deal and they were asking me things like, do you want this for the font and da da da. And I was like, oh, oh, they're gonna read this?
so about the play, because there's also this really uh, like tense moment, I guess I felt your anxiety when you wrote this play and then the actors started saying the words out loud on the stage and you're like, fuck, what what are they doing? They're reading.
Oh, they had to make me go home.
Yeah.
Like they said, you have to go home now because I was in the front row while they were rehearsing, going, no. And I kept saying to my director, I can't hear them.
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, they're. I said, no, they have to go faster. It's a comedy. And finally, they went, you must go home because, in particular, that play for the people that haven't read my book, it's like it was about my premature daughter, and I tend to need to write emotional stuff. It's like I am a radiator. If I don't bleed on the page regularly, I'm like, I have to bleed your
Yeah.
radiators so they won't blow up. And that's what I feel about my writing. And I think I wrote, just like I wrote the play about Kevin, way too early. Like emotionally, I was not there yet. So yeah, it was brutal. And then I just, and the other thing that happened during that experience is I realize when you're first exposed for your writing and you have to hear it out loud or someone says they've read your work, you got to kind of be like, this is another beast now. It's not my beast. It's like,
Mhm.
I've done my part. The actors have to do their part, or if it's the publisher. But I started to not ask people what they thought of it anymore because I thought it just was a wonderful experience for me. I don't know if it's going to be a wonderful experience for them.
Right.
So, I even with this time, because I wanted this book published, and when they did it, I was very touched. And I just, I kept thinking, I don't have to ask people if they like it or if they read it or if they wanted, and it really was lovely to go, oh, I did my part. And then
Yeah.
the publisher did her part and the publicist did their part. And then all of a sudden, the audience or the reader is going to do their part.
Hmm.
But I mean, when I was younger, I was just a nervous wreck about this
Yeah.
stuff. Just
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't, maybe I'm closer to death now. I don't care. But yeah, no, it's emotional putting your work out into the world for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you have that, and I don't know if this is a large family thing. I'm the fourth of five, And I mean, punctuality is a thing, whether you're firstborn or fourthborn, I think. But I think it's that, love me. Hey, I'm over here. Like, I know there's other people in this room for you to love, but
Well,
um,
I think it goes a little deeper too, because what it happens when you are a person on stage or a person on the page,
yeah,
they know everything about what they think you are, and you know nothing about them. So it's like going on a blind date, but they've already done a Google search on you.
right.
So when you've put your heart and soul in, and then people say, "Oh, you're being so like neurotic," you go, "Well, you're not. You're not telling me anything. I just told you everything." And the thing that really helped me about 25 years ago is to, like, I had a friend, I came and used to, people want to go backstage and talk to me, or they'd say, "Do you want to go out for a drink?" And I didn't want to, because after I performed, I was really vulnerable, and I also
Hmm.
didn't want to have to explain myself. And she said, "We only paid $30 a ticket. Like, we don't also owe a private viewing." And
Yeah,
so even when people were asking me to sign my books, I was at a couple of festivals over the past few months. I just was like, I don't owe them any more than what the book is. And
yeah,
I think for a writer, you really do need to get that boundary straight of where the book ends and where you end. Anyway, I'm learning that still. So yeah.
yeah. And it's so hard too, because especially in Canada and the independent publishing machine, you're almost your own publicist too, right? Like, even though Karina is the absolute, like, godsend to Douglas and McIntyre and all the work that she
She
does
really
as a public.
is.
Oh my, I love her so much. That the idea in like, we don't have the New York Times and all of these, like, book reviewers just picking up books and reviewing them, right? So it's like you have to review your own book almost whenever you see people in
Yeah.
public.
It's
Yeah,
it's a me kind of thing, and it's very
yeah,
neurotic. But I do think I said I've picked a book publishing is actually like more neurotic than a comedy, and I'm like, wow, I picked two careers. This is good, because comedians, um, there's a camaraderie because you're both out all on stage together. But we were at the book festival, especially the one in Seashelt in BC, which was brilliant.
hmm,
Just connected with other writers, and we were in the authors room together, and we had this really lovely bond
hmm,
that I thought most authors wouldn't get if they weren't going to festivals like that.
yeah.
And oh my God, we fell in love with each other within 72 hours. We were like, we'd been together forever,
I love
and
that.
I think that was because we all had to get up there and put ourselves out there, and people. What I really think is important too for writers, if this is about writing, is that one of the things, sitting back at that festival in particular, I learned that everybody's how they got published. There was no one way to do it.
Yeah,
And I think as a writer and you're not published yet, or you're self-published and you think, oh my gosh, real publishers would, everybody had an incredible variety of experience. Somebody said, I'm 68 when I started writing, and I've written 10 books, and I don't have an agent. Other people said, I have an agent, and I got her from Britain, and now I made some money. Other people said, I find, like, for me, it was lovely to be traditionally published because I've been both.
hmm,
But I think if you're not published yet, you always think there's something I'm doing wrong.
yeah.
And I don't think that's true, which is heartbreaking at times, because I know there's really good writers that deserve to be
Oh
published.
yeah,
But yeah, and you know this from your
yeah.
your interviews. And
And Meg saying we did fall in love with each other. I'm super
well,
proud
we were like a couple, and we were
of
laughing. Oh,
that.
Meg, that's so great. Yeah, no, we had so much fun, and we all swam in the ocean. And I
Oh, I
mean,
love
how can you be like, I'm having a bad day because I'm swimming in the Pacific Ocean? It was beautiful.
right. And so, like, talking about the struggle to get published, I think the struggle to be an artist in general in Canada. You say in the book, or someone says to you in the book, being a comic is like playing the horses, right? Like you just need one win to get hooked.
Oh,
And
it's
then
really addictive. Yeah, for
yeah, and
sure.
then you're dragged into this making no money machine
Yeah,
of
that's not fun. No,
creativity. Yeah.
no. Yeah, and I
But
think
I love
it's
that.
years ago I looked at it. I had a business coach because I don't enjoy no money. I'm a person that likes to earn a living. I've done poverty really well. And so I do a lot of corporate gigs where I'd make good money speaking.
Right.
And they were soul sucking at times. I mean, you were just, at some pharmaceutical thing, and yet you were making so much money. It afforded me to be able to go write my play where I made my first royalty check for my play was $9.90, and they couldn't issue a check for less than 10. So I think I still have $9 waiting there. But I don't. Anyway, I had a business coach, and of course, she was one of those. What are your wins? What are your celebrations? And I was like, oh, geez, Louise, I don't know. But she did say that Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. So he was a commission. That wasn't his favorite invention. He did it to get some money.
Right.
So I would say I'd always sell my time basically. Well, if I do 3 corporate events, I can take the summer off to write.
Yeah.
And so I would go out and do these, but I also, I don't know if writers are more introverted, right? So, but I'm really social, but at the same time, I love those hours of thinking it through and going for a walk. And I'm recording this show next week, and I was just walking today and I thought of an answer to something. I was like, oh, I could add that line because that would be a callback from earlier. But you don't get that if you're not walking and writing. You have to
Yeah.
walk and you have to write in equal measure. And then you have to rest because your brain will be puzzling it out even when you're not like you could be out at a soccer practice for your kids and all of a sudden you're like, oh, Helen needs to go to the doctor. And then that would make,
Right.
but to me, I don't know about you, but you're never bored. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always interesting because you're always loving stories, right? And loving
Yeah.
that relationship to your ideas.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
I
That's
do a
why I
little bit
love
of, sorry.
that's why I love writing short stories. That's why I
Oh,
love sketch
yes.
comedy because it's that like instantaneous. You live with this idea in your head for a few days, a few weeks maybe, and then you sit down and it just all
Yeah.
comes out and you're like, look at this, look at this.
Joyce Carol Oates said that. She said that if you write short stories, you could learn to build your muscles to be a good writer.
Yeah.
And I've always written blogs and chapters or
Hmm.
something that could end in 2,500 words. It's very satisfying when you come up with an idea like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so I'm worried about our time now. We
We
could,
had so
I
many questions, and now
could
we
stay
have.
here all night. So on page 122, it's titled "The Anatomy of Gratitude," and you're writing in a dollar store journal, a gratitude journal. No need for moleskin because nothing precious or profound was being downloaded. And the gratitude journal becomes an appreciation journal because Kevin says the word sounds more poetic. So my question as a writer, do you still write or attend to an appreciation journal? And if so, how does that feed your creativity?
Um, I think it's kind of disconnected from writing per se. It's more like I am a recovered addict,
Mm-hmm.
and left to my own brain, I'll think of something negative. So I have done it as a training to help me not have as
Yeah.
depression. It's worked as much as an antidepressant. Now, I've taken antidepressants, and right at the moment I'm not, but I feel like there is so much to worry about. And you could say that about now, but I've been on this earth for 67 years and I always found something to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
But I've trained myself. So every morning I get up and make a huge cup of coffee, and then I read a really good book for at least, sometimes for an hour, depending on my day. And then I start to write my gratitude or appreciation. My brother in the book says, appreciation is a lot more like it's an emotional word. It's
Yeah.
it's a sensuous word. But I'll tell you what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that I wake up safe, and
Hmm.
I'm never bored with that.
Hmm.
I am grateful that I have this amazing mattress. I'm just so appreciative of that. And then I have this wonderful coffee. And then I always look back on the day before, because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I think the problems of the day are too big. But I always look down at the day before and I go, well, 5 of those big problems got a little further along. I got some answers.
Hmm.
So it helps me, because otherwise I think I just tend to go into sort of a ruminating thing.
Yeah.
And then I write out what I want to, you know, kind of what I need help with, like who do I need to call today, whatever. With the writing, I'm about to start a new project after this album's taped, and it's going to be too big if I look at the whole thing. Like I got to write a book
Yeah.
because I'll go crazy. So I'm just going to, sometimes I have to go right back to zero and start over, like 15 minutes, 10 minutes. I'll write until the dog needs to pee. Like I have very small goals.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it primes the pump for
Right.
more creativity,
Uh,
right? So that's where my appreciation is. Um, because I've been a kind of a person who always focused on what I didn't have. Like,
yeah.
like, oh, I got a publishing deal, but I didn't get money. I mean, I got a publishing deal, but I didn't get this. Like, it's a terrible way to live. And so
Hmm.
the last, say, 50 years or 20 years, I've done almost daily, that kind of writing. It takes 5
Yeah.
minutes. It doesn't take a long time, but it readjusts. And then I also think for writers and human beings, all human beings, some form of movement every day, exercise. I'm not a fitness person at all, but I live on the beach and I walk on the beach, and just even cold air can change my thought process. Because
Yeah.
I think what we tend to think with writing is that we should just sit down and do it. But
Yeah.
sculptors, they warm up their hands, they warm up their minds. And so we need something to prime the pump, so we're not just recycling our old emotions on the page,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 100%. Okay, I have two more questions. I'm going to ask one, and then I'm going to ask you another one, and I'll email it to you, and then I'm going to include it when I
Oh,
this video. So aside from the fart joke that Kevin insists on repeating on his deathbed, this book is full of literal laugh my ass off moments. I mean, the peeing in a roasting pan that's sitting in the back seat of your car, the
or
idea of peeing like a shotgun went off is a visual I'm going to have in my head forever. It's amazing. So I want to talk to you about the comedy, because at one point also there's this like meta moment where as a narrator you say, yes, I've added another joke here. And so I want to talk about that deliberation that you had in what comedy you were going to include, what jokes you were going to include, what what
well,
hilarious
I got
moment.
to tell you, if Douglas McIntyre hadn't done a really good editing job, there would be, I think the biggest learning for me was I can be funny on stage because my face.
Right.
Like they don't get my face when they get the book. Like they
Yeah.
just get flat words.
Right.
And so there were jokes, and I had several editors before I sent it to a publisher, and some of them were like spiritual people, so they were like, "You can't say that." And then I'd be like, "Okay, can I not?" And so I tinker with that a
Yeah.
lot. I think I tried to take out any of the jokes that would get in the way of the story.
Right.
There were probably 10 more jokes, but I cut them out. And then when I did the final edits with Douglas McIntyre, they even cut more out.
Right.
And I had such a good, can't remember her name, but the final sort of copy editor, like there was a story called Comic Walks into a Mosque. I had about 10 more pages there
Uh,
out. And I said to her, thank you. It was like taking a toddler away from, no, you must take those jokes away from me, because
right.
I won't be able to do it myself. And they really stripped it
Oh,
down. And I
amazing.
was grateful. And also, the other part is I have this theory that people act like comedy is some entity unto itself. Like it'd be like, I mean, you wouldn't ask Sylvia Plath, like, why is your writing so depressed? And
Yeah.
she'd be like, well, let me, I added depression on page 44. But people would say, so I think though the piece is, you don't want the reader not to trust the
Right.
narrator. And because I always deal in all my writing with serious subjects, you can't be like, I'm just going to tell jokes here.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to, for me, I found out if I could just take the punchline out, the humor, I tried to set up the scenario as funny
Yeah.
as opposed to necessarily having punchlines. But I like myself a good punchline, as you may
Yeah.
know.
Yes. No,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, so there we had a couple of people comment in our chat today. So, and I quickly raced to get the book open to write their names down. And if you are watching this video, if you happen to have watched it to the end, we are so very grateful. But I will include in the little blurb when I post this video how you can win 2 tickets to the live taping of Smokehouse on the 24th. So I am going to say follow Deborah Kimmett at One Funny Lady and find out more about her comedy tour at www.kimmett.ca. And of course, you can buy her book directly from www.douglas-mcintyre.ca or from your local favorite indie bookstore, which we love. And that is all. I have one more question, but I'm going to put it in the post, and I'm gonna force you to answer it.
Okay. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I really appreciate it. Window shopping for God from Douglas and McIntyre.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.